Welcome to Shards. This is a new space for the Gage Gallery. We've been here for about 3 months or so, and for me it's an opportunity, to show larger work, but also the work that was accomplished over 18 months, and to be able to actually see it one against the other. So that's been very important. Because the ceiling is almost 11 feet high, we can take advantage of installing in maybe a non-traditional, non-conventional way. So that's been fun. And what else? I'm happy to see my work up. I work in a studio that's a little bit cramped, and I spend a lot of time moving things around. Like literally, I pick something up, I put it over here. I fold up a table, so to actually have the things out and up is a kind of new experience. I also work flat. So in all of these paintings, there's elements that are poured or require, once they're applied. So for instance, in this particular painting, there's a medium that's fairly viscous here, it's white. And then over top or around, you see this paler turquoise part. And in order to get these materials to behave the way they naturally want to behave, you can't disturb them. So once I do something, I have to let it go, and then I watch. And then if I need to, add more water in a certain place, or just be patient, it can be there. But I don't paint this way. So therefore, for a lot of these things, I need a fair space, and that's been a kind of a challenge. It's not difficult, but it is a challenge. And with all of these mixed media paintings, there's elements that are quite intense and deliberately torn into, say, rectangles. So those are the Japanese washi elements. So that's true in this one, the one above. You'll see these areas of more intense activity, and then these open spaces. It's true also of the darker pieces. So there'll be this kind of ground. So in these particular ones, there's this space of, it appears to be raw canvas, has actually been primed, but it's meant to evoke this sense of breath or movement or spaciousness. And then there are things that kind of happen and are interrupted. And they all relate to the title, which I'll talk about in a minute. So if we look at some of the darker ones, so this particular one, Pool 1, was actually included in my last solo show, which was a year ago. So all of this work comes from that time. So we're talking about a year and a bit. But its cousin, so that's Pool 1 and this is Pool 2. So this particular painting required being birthed. If we get closer to it, there's a lot of layers of color that's been obscured. And interesting enough, there's no black paint in this. It reads like black, but it's not black. It's actually very, very dark blue and dark green, and then there are these elements that come out. There's a familiar kind of movement, this movement done in Japanese calligraphy, which is enso. So, this appears in a lot of the paintings, including its, as I said, its cousin. So they're not purely enso, because enso normally starts here and goes in that direction. But the one thing they do have in common is that there's this feeling of movement that's mostly uninterrupted. So unlike oil painting, for instance, you don't stop and scrape out and go back and try and fix it. So there's no fixing. You can layer on top, and because the materials are water-based, they can dry, and there can be another application. So I want to be able to include that kind of feeling of spontaneous but absolutely determined movement. And sometimes it's not quite an enso, it comes in and out of the canvas like this. This one, its movement is, again, it's more obscured by the ground around it. And the colors, you know, these particular colors relate for me very much to water, sense of water, and of looking down, looking into a big body of water depending on the time of day. So obviously if it's night, darker or dusk, you know, the water is going to reflect the sky, so as the sky changes, you're going to get different color change. And then what happens? You get these things, these shards, these bits of color of, and in some cases, they're represented through folded Japanese paper that's been colored or Japanese silk. In this one here, this particular silk was given to me by my maternal grandmother's best friend when I was a child. So some of the fabrics are very old. The actual papers, with the exception of this bright orange one, which I absolutely love, most of the other papers, the patterning and the kind of gesture, the layering of color has been done on big sheets, and then they get torn. They get torn up into bits. In some cases, like if we look at, there's a couple here, actually there's 3 of them here, four. They have this pleated kind of fan shape here, here, definitely here and here. What was I going to say about that? It's a fan shape. Anyway, these are all Japanese papers. In some cases, so this particular paper, it's a momi paper, and what that refers to is in the making of the handmade paper, the paper has been crushed and crinkled and dyed, and in this case, there's a layer of mica, which is a metallic. In this case, it's a kind of powder. It gives us this kind of shimmer. So I also like working with metallics. Again, it's like reflection. You're looking into bodies of water, and as things float up and disappear, and depending on the time of day, you get the light hitting the water in a particular way. So a lot of these mixed media pieces have parts that are shimmery or glistening or that kind of quality. And, you know, unintentionally, there's this feeling of, you know, water bubbles. When I did it, I didn't think, oh, I'm going to put water bubbles. But, you know, as the pieces evolve, and, you know, this particular, and so even though it is very much integrated into its ground color, you know, it's very muscular. There's this kind of churning kind of quality. So they're not meant to be polite, you know, which I kind of like. This piece also took actually a very long period of time from its infancy to when it was done. So what I mean by that is sometimes there'll be certain layers that are done and I don't know what comes next. So I don't like have a formula, oh, you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. You know, the paintings don't come together that way for me. No, after a while, after you've done a number of paintings that may look like a series or may look like a family, there are certain elements that start to repeat, which is fine. But it's really after the fact that I can sit down and say, okay, this and then that. You know, the only, I would say, the only thing I can say contrary to that is that mechanically or technically, you know, I'm using what I would consider to be watercolor methods, even though it's not watercolor, which means that the thinner coats tend to be on the back plane. As we get to the frontal plane, we get, you know, this is beeswax that's been impregnated with metallic. Here there's pierre pince, which is pumice. So the things that are gritty and more textural and more muscular in a sense tend to be on the frontal plane, regardless of their color. So in this case, you see these dark ones? We see the movement, we feel the gesture, but because, you know, the tone, shade on shade, is so close, it's meant to be farther away from us. And then what pulls us to the front plane or to the kind of feeling of being more conscious, so going from unconscious to conscious, in this case it's the color. So the color brings us forward. And that's true when we stand here and we look from a distance towards these other ones, you know. There's this kind of dark brown and, you know, darker, you know, textural things, and then the surface, this brings us towards the kind of the surface.
Thank you.
This one was fun to do. I actually, when I finished this particular painting, I didn't actually know where I was going to show it. It was before I decided to actually do a show here. And in fact, it's meant to be looked at from a distance of 30 feet. So we don't actually, you know. So when I imagined it, I thought that back wall was going to be big enough to accommodate it, and it's not quite. So. Because I wanted this feeling that from 30 or 50 feet, you see this thing with these things that are bobbing up. And then as you approach, you know, you get a different reading of the things that are on the surface. So in all these cases, the washi or the handmade Japanese papers are all different. And they, you know, they have different kind of imagery and in some cases, tone and color. And they were definitely done at different times. So then they get brought out, and then I said, okay, where does this belong here? This particular paper here has been torn down, and it is, I'm going to show this here. It's from a series that are done directly on the Japanese washis. In some cases, they've been torn. There's one that's actually a diptych here. And these are handmade papers from Japan, and they are extremely precious because the people who make these papers are few and far between. You know, it's an intergenerational métier. It's a craft that's you know, thousands of years old, and very few people are actually doing it anymore. So the fact that people not living in Japan use these papers and you know, put them in their art or book binding or whatever it is, conservation, actually helps maintain the cottage industry. And for myself, you know, I've been working with Japanese papers since the 1980s when I did a lot of, so this part is etching. And so this part of even though this was completed this year, this part of the piece was done, I think, in 1984. So sometimes what happens is I will do something in a series, and I just do it. It comes to me, I try it, and then I look at it, and I don't know what it means. And so in this case, and there's a brother piece to this, for literally decades, every so often I pull it out and I look at it. I don't know. And then in this case, so last show and this show, it was like, oh, okay. I can put this with that. And it's only because the process of working and the evolution of my work has brought me so I feel like, okay, now this is calling for that. You know, so I have a lot of things that are kind of not quite done, you know. And then there are series or things that end up being series that come about very, quite rapidly, quite one after the other. This particular small series, it's only 5 pieces. And I did them in one session in the studio. I did not have any particular thing in mind. This was in the last month. And I just did them, you know. But that's after having been working, pretty much on a daily basis on all of this other stuff. So I don't, just have one, in a sense, one way of examining, what's going on in my head. These ones, there's not as much washi in them, but and these ones are bringing back much more drawing qualities. So it's oil stick, and I have to say that I miss the just drawing. So I kind of feel like that will be a natural step for me to start drawing, and yet, because of the way washi behaves. So here we have where you see the hard line. So there's a little bit of pumice that's been mixed in with that color, and then it hits the paper, and the paper is dampened, so that the color spreads. Same thing here. That bloom is because the metallic was mixed in with the turquoise, and the metallic is, it's not a pigment, it's metallic. So it sits on the surface of the paper, and then the stain starts to move. So I'm very interested in that kind of movement, and certainly would like to do things on a bigger scale, not unlike some of these pieces. So this particular piece is called Ori Body Wrapping. It's comes from a series of large pieces, all Japanese paper, acrylic. You can see the metallic, and they're literally that. I imagine a Giacometti figure, and then that's his or her wrap. You have to be tall and very, very bony. You have to be 10 feet tall and be bony like a Giacometti sculpture. So that's where the inspiration for these pieces came. And because we have this magnificent space, this almost 11-foot ceiling, I'm also now envisioning some of my larger pieces where I actually work with washi that's 7 meters. And it would be on the floor, and I would paint it. There's a way to actually paint it continuously and keep it wet until you're done. So hopefully in future I'll be able to do that. I just wanted to mention that I decided, rightly or wrongly, to actually print some of these onto a silk-like material. So now you can wear it. So that's fun. I'll just make one other comment. These round pieces are relatively new for me. They're about, again, I think I started probably about 18 months ago working on a round format, and it's somewhat of a challenge, I'm enjoying it. I have one in the studio that is about 36 inches, and I'll tell you, it's not like working on a rectangle. There's something about it that's, I'm not going to say just yet. I'm not quite sure what I want to say about them. But it is fun. It is challenging, and they are on wood, unlike the others, which are canvas. There's a different treatment because it's wood, and again, it's a fairly new kind of material for me. So I don't want to say whether I like it or don't like it. It is different. It is different than working on canvas and working directly on the washi. So that's about it. Anyway, I'm happy to have the show up, and the show is up for another week until the 19th. And it's a new space for the Gage, and we're open from 11 to 5, Tuesday to Saturday, and Sunday we're open from noon till 4. Most of those days I'm either here or I pop in. So today I'm here officially until 5, and other days, other shifts, I will just kind of sneak in, and if there's people here, I come and speak to them. Let me just point to one other series. This is a slightly older series, but it falls into, so this paper here is the Kuretani paper. And I actually went to this village in Japan, off the highway, Shinkansen to Kyoto. From Kyoto, we took a local train that went under these tunnels for about an hour, and then on a little minibus up the highway. And Literally, the bus lets you off at the side of the highway, and there's this village where they make this paper. And it is, that's one of their papers, but it's a wonderful paper. And at one time, there used to be 80 families making paper in this village, and now there are 2. So I encourage artists and non-artists alike to look into washi paper. The main importer is Nancy Jacoby in Toronto. Hats off to her. For the last 45 plus years, she's been the main importer of Japanese paper, and she does that worldwide. And once you start working on it, you can't quit. So that's about it. Thank you.